Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're learning Masechtas Nedarim Daf Lamed Vav. We're going to begin on the top of Lamed Vav Amud Aleph. We were discussing the question that when it comes to the Kohanim in the Beis Hamikdash, are they Shluchim Dedan? Are they considered to be our Shluchim, or are they considered to be Shluchim Rachmana, Shluchim of Hashem? And the Nafka Mina is if a person makes a neder against this Kohen, whether or not he's allowed to be Makrav Karbanos. So this the Gemara asks, Mosev Rav Shimi Barabba, Im Kohen, if let's say this person who is the Madir is a Kohen, Yizrkal of Dam, Chataso V'Dam Hashamai. We see that he's allowed to be Makrav the Dam on the Mizbeach for a Karban Chatas as well as for a Karban Asham. Now, if you look in Rashi, Katani Stam, it just says it plainly, which is the mashma kol chatais hashamois. It's mashma any karban chatas, any asham. Even if it's not mechusri kapar, because we said in yesterday's daf that perhaps the only time we say is daf when it comes to mechusri kapara, that we make this exception. However, when it comes to other karbanos, maybe not. But over here, we see that it's not just karbanos which are mechusri kapara, but all karbanos, irregular chatas and asham. The answer is no. Dam chatasai shel mitzayra, Dam asham shel mitzayra. When it's talking about a chatas and an asham, it's not talking about any, but it's dafka talking about that of a mitzayra. And a mitzayra is a mechusar kapara. And therefore, again, it's not a raya when it comes to all other karbanos. How do we see this? The pasuk says, Zos tia Torah mitzayra, so bein gadol bein katan. And we learned that not only can it be done for a gadol, but even for a katan, which means that he's someone who does not have das is a katan, which means you can still be makriv and bring and do the zrika for a mitzvah who's a katan, even though they don't have das. So maybe that is the reason why, as we said, that they're able to do it, because we see that there's this leniency that even if you don't have das anyway, so you don't even need their consent or to appoint them as a shliach to begin with. However, again, when it comes to other karbanos, maybe the din is not like that. Let's look in this top ran. She says, the moisiv mebraisa v'loisiv memastisin. The fact that he asked the kasha, shmamina d'loi gar memastisin, lo garis memastisin chatas ha'shamos. He's not garis chatas ha'shamos. V'i meha lo ira dehayu lo oisiv lo memastisin misham b'kivan detanulhu bahadikini zavin memel muchach the chatas ha'shamos the mitzar kaimer. So the question is, how come this statement is not in our Mishnah? Why doesn't it include Dam Chatas and Dam Asham in our Mishnah? So, Uchara, the reason is because it's not talking about all karbanos, because that was the whole kasha. Our Mishnah should just say plainly all karbanos. The fact is, since it's not mentioned in there, Uchara, it's probably not talking about all karbanos. It's talking only about that which is Mechusik Kapara, which is a Mitzvah, which is mentioned in our Mishnah. Tanat. So it says in the Mishnah as follows: HaKohanim shepiglu b'mikdash. Let's say you have a kohen that is mafagel in the mikdash. We know a pigul is a person who has an improper machshava during aspects of the avoda. So the din is, if it's mezidin chayavin, if let's say he did this on purpose, then he's chayav. The kohen has to pay the value to the owner if pigul was done b'mezid, because it's something which is not fit to be able to be brought anymore. So therefore he has to pay the carbon to the owners. Hashaygin paturin. However, if let's say he did it b'shaygin, even though it's a din pigul, he's potter to pay the baal. Ella shepigulon pigul. Itaka is a pigul, but nonetheless the din is that for whatever reason the kohen doesn't have to pay. Now, if you want to tell me that the shliach of the kohen is really the shliach of Hashem, so hainu shepilugan pigul. That's why we say it's not valid. If the kohen is really the shliach of the person, am I pigul and pigul? Why is it pigul? The owner should be able to say that I only appointed you to be able to help me, not to hurt me. So why can't he say this? He says, you're not going to reimburse me, and it's still pigul? Well, if you in fact are my shliach, then I don't want you as my shliach. So it shouldn't be pigul. It shouldn't have any validity either, what you thought. So because of that, it should disconnect him from this. So it's a raya that it must be shluch d'shmaya. So Amri no shani gabi pigel the Amr Kra will yichashev lo mikol makom. So the fact that there's this gzeres hakasa will yichashev, it's in all circumstances. Even in the situation, normally we say that a shliach is only there to help you, not to hurt you, and therefore otherwise you wouldn't want him to be your shliach, but it doesn't work that when it comes to pigel. So if you look in the Ran, shani gabi pigel, as we said, because the pasuk, hilkach ba'ayin hachal ifshite. There's no answer. Mihu nehi de hachal ifshitala mahi de perakam de kedushin muchach de shulchat d'shmainin hu kamasha kasafti l'mala. So the Ran reminds us to make sure that to learn that Ran, which we saw yesterday, that certainly as we saw in kedushin, Maskana that is shluchah d'shmaya, as we said, because it's not shaykh that can be shluchah done. Because if I, non-Kohen, can't do the shlichus, so I can't appoint you, the Kohen, to do my shlichus. So it's a raya over there. So there's no raya brought down in this Masechta, but again over there in Kedushin Uras. Kufa. Getting back to what we said before, when it comes to all karbanos, you need consent of the Baal, chutz m'mechusar kapara. When it comes to mechusar kapara, so in that situation the Kohanim could do it without their consent. Why? Shahari Adam may be carbon al banav al banaisav hakatanim. That a person is able to bring karbanos for his children. Now a katan again has no das. Al miyata yavi adam chatas chaylev al chavero. Then you should also be able to bring a chatas chayla, which is a nice way of saying a person who does an aver b'shogeg has to bring a chatas chayla. Let's say he ate chayla. So shechein adam maybe al ishto shaita Rabbi Yehuda. We said on the previous Amud that Rabbi Yehuda holds that if, let's say, when it comes to a woman your wife is a yoledes, so you can bring the carbon on behalf of your wife even though she's a shaita, which means she has no das. So chayram Alma, what do we see? For some reason we say that doesn't work. Well, why not? If you can bring a carbon when it's mechusar kapara without that person's das, so then why don't we say the same thing when it comes to chatas chaylev? The answer is no. Ish the shaita hechidami. So when we're talking about this woman as a shaita, what are we talking about? Let's say she ate the chaylev, which is a shaita. Now, normally a healthy person would have to bring a carbon chatas. However, since she's a shaita, la bas carbon she's not obligated to bring a carbon, because since she does not have the mental capacity to do mitzvos properly, so she's not accountable, responsible when she does an avera. So therefore, you don't have to bring a carbon. So if your wife is a shota, you wouldn't bring a chatas chayla if she ate it. Nebuch, she's a shaita. Now what? Well, one second. Now how about v'ida acha kashish kachas? Let's say originally she was healthy, and that's when she did the avera, and that moment she's chayev to bring the carbon, and then v'nishtatis, and then all of a sudden she becomes a shaita before the carbon's brought. So Rabbi Yomi Voy, Rabbi Yochanan, achol chaylev. Let's say a person eats chaylev, the hifresh carbon, and even if they separate the carbon, v'nishtata, and then the person becomes a shaita, v'chazer v'nishtapa, and then even afterwards, before the carbon, they become sane again, puzzle. Nonetheless, because there was a moment that she was a shaita at the time that the carbon was around, even though it wasn't brought yet, so the din is that carbon is puzzle. Hoyel v'nincha yidache. So the din is that once it's pushed off, it's pushed off. So the din is that when it comes to this is the one time there is no din of being able to bring such a carbon. So this is actually a very simple, clean answer to question 3. Adam may be carbon al ishto shaita Rabbi Yehuda be'ezek carbon lo mishkachas law. Which carbon can you not bring for your wife if she's a shaita? And that is a chatas chaylev. Okay, that was question 3. All right. So now the Gemara asks the following question. So al miyatam yavi adam pesach al chavero. So if you're saying a person can bring karbanos without das in certain circumstances, certainly when it causes a person to be able to is a mechusar kapara or in general. So how about a carbon pesach? Shechein adam maybe al banav al banaisav hakatanim. So even though it's not mechusar kapara, but it's all totally on no das. So a man is able to bring a carbon pesach even for his children. His children can eat the carbon pesach. So Alama Omer Rabbi Lezer Hifresh Pesach Chavero. We know that if you separate a carbon Pesach for your friend without the owner's consent, lost a klum. You didn't accomplish anything. So the question is, we look in the Ran, that before the Shchitas of Pesach, you have to figure out and you have to account for all the different people. So if you didn't have this person as part of your cheshbon, that person didn't know that you were sacrificing it, or this person sacrificed on behalf of, and you didn't know he was doing it for you, it doesn't work. But why not? If it works for her katan, in which doesn't have das, so it should work for everyone else. So Omer Reb Zera Selabes Avos Lav Deraisa. This notion of Selabes Avos is not deraisa. What does that mean? So the Ran explains. L'olam b'chi hai donen umihu b'pesach lo matzi lo medak the selabes avos lav deraisa the mina Torah. According to the actual letter of the law, the Torah, ein hakohanim srichin l'himanais b'seh im b'nei chabura. When it comes to the shchitas of Pesach, you do not have to have in the cheshbon in your mind that children are part of the chabura. They're still allowed to eat from the carbon Pesach, even if they weren't counted as part of the group. We know that a carbon, as we say in karbanos, can only be eaten when you're part of that group. Those are people that are fit to be counted, namely adults. So the whole reason why you can do it for the sake of a katan is not because it's on das and all this, and therefore maybe it should also work for a gadol. The point is that you can shech the carbon pesach and they could eat the carbon pesach because we don't have this requirement for these children to be included in the group. Okay. Selabes avos lav deraisa memai. How do we see this? If a person says to his kids, "Hareini shaychin es Pesach," I'm going to shech this carbon. Al mi she'ola mikem rishon l'Yerushalayim. Whoever is fast, the quickest person, we want to see a quick 5K over here. Whoever can get to Yerushalayim the fastest. Kivan shehichnas rishon. Once the first kid brings his rosh of arubo, his head and the majority of his body there, zocha b'chalkai. He gets his portion, and he gets his brother's chelik too. Now, if it's true that every single person had to be counted for, so al bisra koi umazaki lahu. How is it possible that regarding this meat he can be standing by and acquire it? Obviously, he shouldn't be able to do so because he's only one person. If he was if all of his kids were included in the carbon pesach, so then he shouldn't be able to then take their portion. So why did he say this? It was just kadil zars and b'mitzvos. He just wanted to get his kids to go quick to do a mitzvah. The daughters came before the boys. We find that the girls were quick and the boys were not. If you look at the Ran over here, it doesn't say that the girls got it and the boys didn't. Everyone really got a chelik in this case. He just wanted Lazares to have his children do it quickly. So this is just an example of how, in order to do a mitzvah, they don't just say, I do a mitzvah, but he wanted to be able to inspire his children to all go as quickly as possible. Okay, let's now continue with the next part. V'tayim es trumasov. So the Mishnah on Lamed Hamad Beis said that even though you made a neder, you could also separate this person's truma. So on this, as we continue on to Lamed Vav Lamed Beis, the Gemara asks a question. Hatayrim mishalo. Let's say a person takes truma from his own fruit, al shel chavero, to remove tevel from his friend. Sarach daita olo. In that situation, do you need your friend's consent? So you're actually taking fruit from your own. So your friend's not losing any fruit. And therefore, you're really seemingly doing him a nice big favor by separating his fruit without even having him take any of his fruit. You're using your own. So me, I'm reading kivan deschusulo. You're doing a good thing for him. Lo tzarich das. He doesn't need his consent because there's a concept of zachan l'adam shlo b'fanav. He doesn't need to be with you, as the Ran quotes, and it's logical that you're doing him a huge favor. Well, dilma mitzvah dilehi. It's his mitzvah. V'nichale lemevde. He's the one that wants to do it, and therefore maybe it's a chayiv, and ein chavan lo ela b'fanav. Maybe you have to get his consent. So tashma. So we learn like this: Tarim es trumasav. Our Mishnah says that even though the person made a neder, you could still separate his truma ves masraisav l'daito with his consent. B'mai. So what does it mean with his consent? B'mai eskinan ilema min bal hakri. Are we talking about the person who is the owner of this pile of grain that you're separating? So al shel bal hakri, that he has to get consent al bal hakri on his own crop. In other words, he's separating his crop. He has to make sure that he knows about it. Uadaito deman ilem uadaito delay his own das man shavi shliach. So there's no shliach over here. It sounds like he's just doing everything himself. El uadaito de balakri. It means the consent of the owner of the pile. Ha kamahanile. So he's getting hana. And he's doing his shlichus. And he made a neder against him. So if he's doing your shlichus, this is hana. So how could he do this? El mishalo. It's his own grain. El shel hakri. Uadaito, and it's with his consent. Uadaito deman. Ilem uadaito debal hakri, the owner of the pile of food. Hakamahaniwe. He's getting hana. El uadaito denashe. The person who's taking the truma. Mishalo tayrim. Al shel chavero, which is our case. He's taking the truma from himself. The iyamrit sarach das. If you need consent, hakamahanile. Elav in sarach das. L'chara, this is a proof that you don't need das. Where is this low? L'oilam mishel bal hakri. Really, he took the friend's grain from the friend's grain. Al bal hakri. K'dyamar Rava ba'omer kol haraitz l'itrom yava v'yitroim. It's a situation where he says anyone who wants to do it can do it. Hachinami ba'omer b'chul. Okay, so let's look at the Ran. So the Ran says like this: El adaita de nafshe kivan de medaite ovid. Since he's doing with his consent, he's not giving him anything. Umudar v'asim asnisen kachanan. We can say it's like chanan, like you pay off someone else's loan, or you feed mefarnes a woman while the husband's in Medina Siyam. The Rabbanan iyasher de loy gara miproy chayva de asal Rabbanan. Harash mazal, fine. The li nira defil Rabbanan shardi kivan asikol kaman the tarim mishal al shachavero tovasana shel tarim ika. Tovasana ika member the tarim lases also kain shehu writes al eschavin. Okay, so if we look, what is the answer? We're talking about kol writes al yitrom yavol yitrom. Says the Ran. The chiyai gamna mahani l'gabi truma. This actually works. The begili das bilchud nichle sagri. That it's just his gili das that he's saying that anyone could separate it is enough. L'gabi mudar hana l'chashiv mahena. So l'char he's getting hana. So why is that not hana? He vandal mishavi le'idach shleach behedya. He didn't appoint him to be his agent explicitly. He said it just as a blanket general statement. Anyone can do it. It's only if he says it in that way. Anyone who hears my voice, that's a shlichus yasam mudar hana. So there's a difference in the language. If you say just anyone who wants to do it, so that's not going to consider to be an element of hana. But if you were more specific and said anyone who hears my voice, so that already does not work. If we skip like 10 lines down to the almost where the wide line is, if you say anyone who does truma will not be mafsid, afshir diafil gabi truma lumahani, that may not work. The love lishna malihu kishiyavav yitroim. It may not be a good. It may not be enough of a language that if that person does it, that it'll work at all. Question 4. Ha'omer kol hashomeh koyli yitrom, o kol ha'toyrim enu mafsid. These are only from the Ran. Ha'im havi shlichus mali litrom ha'im mutter b'mutter hana. So, as we saw in the Ran, anyone who says, Kol Shemei Koyu, anyone who listens to my voice, that is considered to be a shlichus, and therefore, since it's a real shlichus, then it's asur b'mod hana. He's not allowed to do it. However, if he says Kol Tarim Enu Mafsid, anyone who does truma won't lose out, that's not shlichus at all. It's nothing. Enu shlichus with truma. TA 11. So the question is, Hamoider hana mechaveroi. If a person is moider hana from his friend, tarim es trumasav ledaita. So he says you can take up the truma. Hechi shari. How is this allowed? Hamahanile de ovid shluchuse. L'chari he's doing his shlichus. So he said either, as we said in the Maskana, he says kol roitza litrum yabaviyatrom, and that's allowed. Or we're talking about b'meduber mishlo al shel balakrim and sarachdas b'shlichus. We're talking about a situation, it's his, and he's taking it off on his own fruit on behalf of the person who is the balakri. Okay, which again, we tried to say perhaps that was a raya that a person could do such a thing, and it's considered to be zachan l'adam shel b'fanav. All right, so now the Gemara asks the following question: B'mini Rabbi Yomi Reb Zera Tatarim Mishlo. A person takes off truma al shel chaver for his friend, tovas hana shel mi. Since you took off your truma but you did on behalf of the other person, so now you have this truma. So who actually is able to give this truma to the kohen? Mi amrinan ila pera dahayich. If it wasn't for this person's fruits, mi masach nikarya dahi. Since he took off the truma, now the rest of the pile is mutter to eat. O dilma ila. So therefore, he's the one that did it. The person who the Baal Tairim. O dilma ilav karya dahu lo habi peri dahadin truma. The only way that this is truma is only because of the pile of fruit. The only, because you can't just make fruit that's in front of you truma. It has to be within proportion to other fruit. So therefore, the fact that there was this pile, that's what created this to be a truma. So therefore, even though it may not have been the balakri's fruit, but it was the pile of fruit which caused this to end up potentially being truma. And therefore, maybe the balakri has the right to decide who it goes to. So when it says v'nosata, so we learn out from here that actually it's the Baal Hakri who has the ability to give it out. So we look in the Ran, Tol and Hadasina b'Baal Hazera dehainu Baal Hakri. Okay. Eisvei tarim es trumasav. A person who's tarim es trumasav es masari sivladaito. Navi amrit avasana de Baal Hakri. You're telling me that's the Baal Hakri that has the rights to this. Hakomahanile. So he's getting hana from this guy, and I thought he's not allowed to get hana. El shmamina tavas hana delay. The tovas hana must be the one who is the tairim. He's the one that does this. Amri lo mishel Baal Hakri al shel Baal Hakri lo. Mishel Baal Hakri al shel Baal Hakri. Daito de Baal Hakri, but Oimer call Roitzalitrim Yabaviatroim. So maybe let's talk about that situation. Tashma. Yomer Bavoim Rav Yochanan Makdish. When it comes to a person who's Makdish something, Moisav Chayim, says the Ran, Hamakdish Behema, lo Karbonai. Shil Chaver. Let's say you're Makdish an animal for a carbon of your friend, and then Vuhumma, says the Ran, it gets a mum for Roitzaliv dice, you want to redeem it, Makdish Kuri Balim. So we say that this one who is makdish it has to not only when he's paid it, he also has to add an additional fifth. When it comes to the one who is achieving the kapara, he is the one that is able to do a din tamura of switching it over from one animal to the next, even though it retains its kedusha. But tarim mishalo al she'enu shalo, if a person is Tyrim of his to someone else's, Tavasana Shalo, then the Tyrim is the one who has the ability to give out this to whoever he wants because it's his. So therefore he has the right to be able to do so. Question 4 we're going to stop there. We saw TA11. So let's see TB12, which will be the last question we'll see. So, Madu Asr Lamadir Litrum Chumasav Shal Hamoidir Mimenu, Mishal Hamoidir Al Shalo, Be'eza Oifen Mutter. Perhaps since if he had Das, so you are giving him hana. But if you heard him say before to a crowd, anyone who wants can separate my truma, so here there's no hana, since it's not you, a different person would have done it anyway, so it is mutter. Let's see if that's what they wrote over here. Question 12. Kivan shein yochel litrum el medaito mahanhu bekach she'oisa shechusa v'im oimer bal kri kol retzel litrum yav vitrum mutter adkan.